Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Germany once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a few different styles, but I would say this brewery are known mainly for their New England hazy IPAs. And as I've told you in previous German reviews, there are a good number of the kind of new wave American style craft breweries popping up in Germany these days. And when you think about the technical expertise that the Germans already have with brewing and all these wonderful traditional styles that they've got, the idea of some of these brewers turning their attention to the American side of things is pretty interesting, I have to say. And there are some really good American style breweries down there these days. So I highly recommend that you check out some of these German IPAs and Imperial stouts and things like that if you get the chance. There are some great examples of those styles out there. But the brewery that we're going to return to today is a brewery that I guess you could consider as being at the forefront of that. They're one of the best known German American style breweries, I guess we could say. And I've enjoyed the beers I've had from them. But the one that we're going to look at today is from a series that is fairly new from what I understand. It's got a very good reputation so far, and it's a style that I've not had from them either. So I think this one should make for a very interesting review. So let's see how we go with this one then. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to a little place called Gundelfingen and der Donau, which is in the Schwaben region of Bavaria in southern Germany, about halfway between Stuttgart to the west and Augsburg to the east. And we're going to have a look at another beer from Frau Gruber Brauerei, I guess we could say. So this one is from their Black Barrel series. It comes in at 11.8% ABV, and this is the Heaven Hill. So an Imperial Stout aged in Heaven Hill, Kentucky bourbon barrels. So yeah, this should be really interesting. But this beer was released here in Sweden as part of the Tillfällig temporary assortment through Systembolaget. The exact release date, I believe, was the 28th of September 2021. But yeah, it's the first time in a wee while I've seen a Frau Gruber beer. I think the last one I reviewed from these guys was back in about August of last year. So yeah, that is it has been quite a while since we've had one of these. So yeah, looking forward to this for sure. And my first Imperial Stout from these guys will be really interesting as well. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, we'll go through a little bit of a brewery history before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from these guys in the past, and we will no doubt add some more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the German beers that I reviewed for you, and that's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, but not as often as I would like. Hopefully we can fix that soon. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. And since this is one of the kind of new wave American style craft breweries from Germany, I want to give a special shout out to my good friend Peter over at the Clueless Drinker, who used to live in Regensburg in Bavaria, and he was the first beer tuber to really touch on these kind of American style beers coming out of Germany, and I know that he loves these. So hopefully we can get him on the channel again at some point fairly soon. But yeah, let's crack on with the brewery history then. On to my brewery notes. So Frau Gruber Brewing were founded by Matthias Gruber and Enzo Fallenschuh, who were skate park friends from Augsburg in Bavaria in southern Germany. So Matthias had previously worked for a company that manufactured printing presses, and he went to Australia to work for a few months, and while he was there, Enzo visited him, and they went to drink craft beer because Enzo was studying at the Weihenstephan Institute, which is part of the Technical University of Munich, a very famous brewing school, of course, and home to the oldest brewery in the world. But he'd been a brewmaster at Riga Miele for 5 years, and that is another German brewery that I would highly recommend you check out if you haven't already. They've got some great stuff. But in 2013, they founded a craft beer wholesale business together, which was called Liquid Hops, and this focused initially on importing Belgian and American beers into Germany. And this was initially a part-time venture, but then demand for these craft beers grew hugely, and so Matthias made craft beer his profession. But the pair soon after this began to homebrew for themselves, and they sold their beers at the market, where they proved to be hugely popular. So they decided to combine their names and chose Frau Gruber as the name of the brewery, and they agreed with Markus Lohner to brew at the Old Kamba Brewery, and the brewery can be found in Gundelfingen and der Donau, which, like I said earlier, is about halfway between Stuttgart to the kind of northwestish and Augsburg to the sort of southeastish. But they've continued to grow over the years. They've grown their exports in the most recent years. They've been sending their beers all across the European continent, which is great. And they've just been adding new styles and stuff like that as well. But as of September 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, they are still filming in the Old Kamba Brewery in Gundelfingen and Donau. I think Kamba aren't really involved at that one anymore, from what I understand. And they've produced in the region of 120 different kinds of beers, many different IPAs, both West Coast and New England, of course. But yeah, they are starting to produce some more things like this, Imperial Stouts. And I've seen a few sours actually from Frau Gruber in recent times as well. So I do need to try a few different styles from this brewery. It's been a bit too long since I've been able to review one of their beers. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Frau Gruber Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and have a look at the beer itself. So this is actually the first bottled beer that I've had from Frau Gruber. Let me just make sure that the camera is picking this up for you nicely. You can see it's got a lovely kind of, it's almost like the inside of some of these shells actually. You can see that lovely pattern there. It's like a kind of bacteria microscope sort of thing. But there you can see, not sure how well that's going to show up with the light right enough. And let the camera zoom on it. Here we are. Frau Gruber, Heaven Hill. There you are. But yeah, also on the import sticker there as well. And I think the light might just be a little touch bright for that. So let me just take it down a notch. There we go. So as you can see, very nicely presented this one. There is Frau Gruber, Heaven Hill. This is a half-litre bottle. Standard for Germany, of course. But this beer was actually a little bit pricey. When I got this one through Systembolaget, it was 180 Swedish kroner, so that is about 18 euros. So yeah, I paid quite a little bit for this one. For a half litre, I would say that's a bit expensive. If it was a 700 or a 750, it's probably about right, I would say. So this beer was a little bit pricey for what it is, I would say. But, you know, it was the first time I'd seen an Imperial Stout from these guys, and I just kind of thought, you know, bugger it, why not? Let's have a look at it and see. So, yeah, as we say, an 11.8% Imperial Stout. It says on the side here, a blended Imperial Stout brewed with maple syrup and aged in Heaven Hill bourbon barrels from 12 to 24 months with Madagascar bourbon vanilla. So, yeah, this should be pretty special. But just a plain black bottle cap on this one, and as I said to you, this beer was released as part of the Lokal Osmoska, not the Lokal Osmoska League, the Tillfällig Sortiment on the 28th of September 2021 through Systembolaget here in Sweden. So let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I think this should be pretty damn good, and I am going to share this beer with some friends after we finish the review. So as soon as you open the bottle, you get a big whiff of bourbon wood in this one, and as I've explained to you in previous Imperial Stout reviews, for me, if we compare, you know, if we compare bourbon barrel aging to Scotch barrel aging, for example, the American bourbons always give you a very, very smooth, woody character. You can smell a hell of a lot of vanilla coming off this. I think this is going to be pretty special. But yeah, it's lined up once again. So before the head disappears in this one, you can see that this beer poured with about a quarter finger of a frothy. I would say that's a very deep tan head that comes out of this one. It looks very, very nice, in fact. But yeah, that's faded away to just be a very thin foamy layer and a ring around the edge of the glass. But when the beer is 11.8%, you kind of expect that. You don't expect the head to hang around all that long with the beer. But yeah, it's a lovely dark ebony kind of rosewood colour, which is what you would expect of an Imperial Stout, of course. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on, one, the type of malts that you use. That determines the magnitude of the colour of the beer. Two, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do and any adjuncts that you put in are also going to affect it as well. Although when it comes to an Imperial Stout, usually those things are a bit hard to detect, although the colour of the head can change. So perhaps some of the barrel aging and stuff has made the head on this one a little bit more unusual, because you don't find too many Imperial Stouts that have a head quite the same colour as this one. I'm not sure how well that's showing up on the camera there, but yeah, the colour of the head on this beer was pretty unusual. But yeah, you can see one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but I mean, overall it does look very, very nice, this one. So yeah, an 11.8% monster we've got here. And if we shine the light through it, it does have a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola coloured edge to it, but pretty much there's not a lot in the way of transparency to this one. But yeah, the aroma, the little whiffs I'm getting off of this beer smell absolutely lovely. So I think it is about time to have a closer look at the aroma of this one. So pretty much as you would expect in terms of appearance from an Imperial Stout. And yeah, let's have a look at the aroma then and see how we go. That is... I don't think I've had an Imperial Stout that smells quite like this before. But that is just ridiculous. That smells very, 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 very nice. One of the best Imperial Stout aromas I've come across, I think, on the channel so far, and that's not an exaggeration. It's just got the perfect combination of oak and vanilla in it, and it's just beautiful. That's a beautiful, beautiful aroma. So just on that alone, a massive thumbs up to Frau Gruber. I really hope the flavour of the beer lives up to that aroma, because that is just unreal. It's just ridiculous. So I think this beer has won my respect already, even if just for the aroma. I've never smelt an Imperial Stout that smells quite like this one. But just the overall impression of this is really very, very smooth, almost silky smooth, lovely, a lot of vanilla, and the blend between vanilla and oak in this is just sublime. It's just ridiculously good. Not a lot of hoppy character, and just a very light fruitiness actually. Now, as I've said to you before, when it comes to the American bourbons versus the Scotch whiskies and the barrel aging side of things, Scotch whisky barrel aging always is a bit difficult because it's very, very pungent and strong in its flavour. The American bourbon barrels tend to give you a really big smoothness. Actually, you get a lot of smoothness and sweetness out of an American bourbon barrel, rather than the dryness and sort of smokiness and things like that, and graininess that you'll get from the Scotch whisky barrels. So that for me is the main difference. And even, you know, Scotch whisky is more grainy and things like this compared to the American bourbons, which are very sweet. It's kind of like the, you know, the difference between the sort of traditional English craft beers, if you like, and the American ones. Whenever the Americans get their hands on something, they make it sweeter. It's just how it goes. But aroma on this is just ridiculous. So let's break this down for you and just describe what's going on here. Yeah. So I mean, underneath this beer, you can smell that lovely big smooth oaky character to this one. That's apparent right away in this. But within the oak, you can smell there's a bit of smoothness to it. It's got a lovely, it really has a lovely smoothness in there. You can smell the vanilla kind of blending in with that. The vanilla really smoothens out the oak, but you do get a little bit of a drier character out of this one as well. Now, I suspect that this beer has had a fairly long wort boil, and you can smell, you know, on top of the wood, you can smell the sort of bourbon, the light kind of bourbon brown sugary layer coming out of the beer. But on top of that, you can smell the brown sugars in the malt base itself. And the woody character is so, it's not pungent, but it's just so dominant in the aroma that it smooths out the brown sugars really nicely. And it gives you an almost leathery character, a mix of a leathery woody character in the brown sugars there. So you can smell a wee bit of a straight up sweet caramel out of this one, but at the same time it's just very, very slightly toasty, very slightly toasty. Not roasty, I think roasty is too strong a word to describe it, but it really gives you that big sweet brown sugar, and then just that is just very, very lightly toasted, as we say. But then you can smell, in this one, you can really smell the sort of fibrous character of the vanilla beans. It's ridiculous. This is very, very, very nice. There's one or two little nutty aromas to it, but I think the dominant aromas in this are the oaky wood, the sort of fibrous character of the vanilla beans, or vanilla pods, I guess you could say. But you get so much of that out of this beer. I can't remember, is vanilla a bean or a pod? It's really gone out of my head. But yeah, the vanilla, the way that the malt base in this goes together is really, really nice. Do we get chocolate out of this? It's maybe a little light hint of a kind of cocoa nib. It's got that little bit of a kind of cocoa nib dryness to it. So you get a kind of nice dry chocolate out of this one, but it's quite a milky chocolate. And when you've got so much vanilla present, to be honest, that makes sense. So you get a sort of, 30% almost milky chocolate character in the aroma of this beer. But it smells great. I mean, when it's aged for 12 to 24 months and it's all blended up and things, and you've got maple syrup in there as well, it just makes sense. So the brown sugars, I think that very sweet, if I was smelling this blind, I don't think I would pick up that it was maple syrup, but I would pick it up as just a very, very light, slightly toasty caramel, actually. But beautiful, beautiful aroma. On the hoppy side of things, I don't think there's too much to report in this, and especially when it's a barrel aged beer, most of the hoppy character is going to have dropped out of it. You do get a very slight earthiness to it. It's nice and smooth, and you've also got a good little bit of you've got a nice little bit of a floral note to it, and also some light grassy notes. But yeah, most of the hoppy character has dropped out of this beer, as you would expect. On the fruity side of things, though, again, it's not too pungent in that sense. You get a little bit of an almost cakey brownie kind of character out of it, a little bit of that chocolate cakey brownie, but then there's a wee bit of a light figgy character, a little bit of a black currant, maybe just a little bit of a kind of juicy raisin or something as well. But yeah, the aroma coming out of this beer is just absolutely beautiful, I have to say. Love it. Beautiful aroma, this one. Other than that, not too much to report. So as I always say, take a bit of time and ponder over the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them. But the aroma of that is something else. I don't think in nearly 3,100 reviews, I don't think I've come across an Imperial Stout with an aroma quite like this one. So yeah, and when it's 180 kroners, when it was 180 Swedish kroner, 18 euros, it's it better be worth it. So yeah, 18 euros, what, about £16, somewhere in the region, like $22 or something for this, for a half litre. I think, that better be worth it. But let's have a taste of this one then. So yeah, this one is the Heaven Hill from the Black Barrel series from Frau Gruber Brewing, an 11.8% Imperial Stout with maple syrup and vanilla from Frau Gruber in Gundelfingen an der Donau in the Schwaben in Bavaria down in Germany. Let's get stuck in. Slange, Skål, cheers, Prost. My first German Imperial Stout in quite some time. Let's go for it. Prost. Ooh. This is interesting. I wonder, this almost has a little bit of a kind of wine barrel aged kind of vibe to it. It's got a little bit of that kind of Venice edge to it, yeah. That, I did not expect that, to be honest with you. I thought this was going to be it is big and smooth and silky. First impression of this is it's actually quite like a red wine barrel aged Imperial Stout, but then you get all the flavours you'd expect in the aftertaste. So yeah, really interesting on the impact. As I say, a little bit of that kind of Venice red winey kind of thing. So would that be acidity? Would be a little bit of acidity maybe. But yeah, it's certainly got a wee bit of that kind of red winey, tanniny sort of thing in the beginning, but then in the aftertaste you get all the bourbon and all the vanilla and things that you'd expect. So this is definitely a really quirky beer, I have to say. Not quite sure what to make of this. Yeah. This is not what I expected at all from this one, but this is why we do these reviews, because you get some really strange beers that will just throw you off completely sometimes. So yeah, where would we start with this? Yeah, let's just break the beer down as we go then. So since this one has quite an unusual impact to it, you know, I'll usually talk about impact when it comes to sake videos. I guess we need to talk about impact in this one as well. But let's talk about the backbone of the beer first, and then we'll go on to the impact, because the backbone really lingers there into the aftertaste. Straight away across the middle of your palate with this one, you feel that lovely, smooth, oaky character. That's in the middle third and the back third of your palate. Now, towards the front of that middle third of your palate, that's when you get the more kind of vanilla-y type flavours out of it, but you can feel the sort of fibrous-y note from the kind of vanilla beans, vanilla pods sort of thing sitting on top of the wood there. But as you go further back on the palate, the wood kind of the oaky wood kind of dries out a little bit, and you get more of that kind of dry, you just get that more kind of dry, almost slightly spicy character from it. But of course, as I said, American bourbon is very, very smooth, and it's the American oak tends to be very, very smooth as well. Remember, European oak and American oak are different species, so that is probably also part of the reason why we have this thing that I was talking about between Scotch whisky barrel aging and American whisky barrel aging, bourbon barrel aging. But yeah, so on top of that, as I say, further you go into the aftertaste with it, you start to get the bourbon there. On top of that kind of fibrous-y thing, you can feel the bourbon, the brown sugars from the bourbon just sitting on top of that, and that's both in the middle third and the back third of your palate. That is the backbone of this beer. That's it. Now, as I said, we should talk about and I would say even those notes I was talking about, they do spread into the kind of front third of your palate as well. It's woody, vanilla, that fibrous vanilla sort of thing, and then the bourbon brown sugars on top of it. That is front, middle, and back third of your palate. That is the backbone, but it just gets drier the further back on the palate that you go. So my usual reviewing method needs to be revised a little bit for this this beer, to be honest with you. So this is one that is testing the palate in a sense, and this is what we want. So as I said, I want to talk about the impact with this beer a little bit, because it is quite unusual. So when you take it in, on the front of your tongue, you're going to get a little bit of that kind of acidity. That's definitely acidity, because it is quite similar to the sour beer. So yeah, you're going to get that little bit of acidity and sort of, I don't know if it's quite tanny, but that sort of acidic, vinous-y type thing coming out of this one. It doesn't taste like grapes. It just tastes like a kind of straight up sort of acidity, red wine barrel kind of thing. It really is very much like that. So you get that right behind the kind of front tip of the tongue, then it just spreads back a little bit and just mellows out, and it lingers there a little bit the further that you go into the aftertaste. But for me, on that front third of your palate, that is really, really sitting there. And then the backbone of the beer comes out a little bit more beyond that. Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't think the impacts, we say it's quite sharp and things just behind the front curve of the palate, and then as you go further back, it just mellows out a little bit, and you get some of these nice kind of drier, fruity elements out of it, and that sits on top of that. But I think we should come back to that a little bit later, to be honest with you. Let's just go back to focusing on that middle third of your palate just now. So as we say, wood, vanilla, fibrous-y kind of thing, then the bourbon sugars. On top of that, what I would say is that there is a layer of a kind of cocoa nib. It is like a kind of cocoa nib type quality. You can feel that kind of cocoa nibby, dry, powdery chocolate sort of thing sitting on that middle third of your palate. So you can feel the dryness there, particularly towards the back, the front third of that middle third of your palate, sorry. And I would say we're talking maybe a sort of 40 or 50% cocoa chocolate. You can get some of the kind of milkier elements coming out of it, but that's most likely because of the presence of the vanilla in this one, absolutely. But on top of that, you get some lovely brown sugary elements. So yeah, on top of that, if you go right to there's a kind of circle in the middle of your palate, And that's the sweet. That is the maple syrup there, absolutely. It does taste a little bit more like maple syrup in the flavour. You know, I wasn't detecting that so much in the aroma, I have to say. It does taste a little bit more like a maple syrup right in the middle of the palate there. So you've got that brown sugary circle, and the base layer of it is actually quite a dry, slightly toasty brown sugar. And it gets a bit more kind of bitter and toasty the further out towards the edge of the palate. So if you go into the dead centre of your tongue, there is a nice little bit of a kind of, you know, a kind of concentrated, boozy brown sugar out of this one, which I like. And the other thing is that the further into the aftertaste you go with this one, you start to get more and more of a kind of leathery character, which I find quite interesting. So maybe that indicates a slightly longer wort boil, actually. So yeah, I think that covers the middle third of your palate. Let's focus on the back third of your tongue then. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of a bready build up in there again, a bit of a kind of bread crusty quality, and the graininess comes out a little bit more. But yeah, again, the back third of your palate, you've got the woody layer and it's a bit drier. You've got the kind of vanilla, fibrous-y, beany sort of thing there, and again, that gets a little bit drier too. And on top of that, you've got the kind of, you can feel a little bit of the kind of cocoa nib going in on top of that as well. And the brown sugars from the bourbon are a bit drier too. So yeah, back of your palate, as I always say, is drier. The sweeter flavours come out the further forward you go. But on top of that, you do get a wee bit of a kind of yeasty character coming out of this one. You can feel a little bit of that kind of brown bready, yeasty sort of vibe to this beer, which I think is great. So yeah, there's quite a lot of that coming out of this one, but it's not too tall. The flavour of this beer is actually kind of squashed and condensed together, which I like. So when you start at the back of your palate, the back third of your palate is taller, but it condenses down just a little bit. And as you go into the middle third of your palate, you can feel it squashing down. The sort of fibrousy character of the vanilla beans is kind of pushing this one up a little bit, but the yeasty notes aren't too tall in this one, if that makes sense. But I think that's everything we need to say about the malty, yeasty, barrel aging side of the beer. So let's focus on the other things. So back corners of the palate, then there is a wee bit of kind of earthiness in there. So you get a little bit of that kind of earthy, hoppy character. As you move further forward, it's a little bit herbal, and that kind of persists until you push forward right onto the front corners of the palate. You get a little bit of a kind of, you know, a little bit of a floral aromatic remnant to the beer, a little bit of that. Then round the front curve of the palate, it's a bit lighter and grassy. You get a wee touch of zestiness out of it, and that again just lingers there. But like we said, it's barrel aged. Most of the hoppy character will have dropped out of this one. Not too much else we need to say about the green component of this beer. But yeah, front third of your palate, border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you actually get a little bit of a kind of cakey build up this time, like a chocolate brownie, the well fired edge of a kind of chocolate brownie, if you like. Then the base of the front third of your palate is very much that kind of dry, cocoa nibby, chocolate powdery sort of kind of chocolate brownie kind of thing. You get a lot of that out of this beer for sure. So yeah, as we said, you've got that kind of acidic character sitting on top of this one. So I would say that the fruity character in this one is quite different. Like it's like a it's like a juicy tart raisin that you get out of this one. It is like a juicy tart raisiny kind of blackberry sort of thing. It's quite difficult to pick out. It's not quite grapey, but it really does have a little bit of that kind of red winey sort of thing. It's almost like a kind of sharp prune. I think that would be a good way to describe it. So yeah, you've got a bit of raisin at the back. You can feel the kind of plummy notes underneath and a dried but still quite tart prune. And as you come further forward, you can feel that just mellows out a little bit. And as you get into the kind of front half of that front third of your tongue, there are some, there are some really nice kind of juicy, kind of blackberry tart notes to this one. But yeah, it really has a little bit of that just Vinish red wine kind of character on the front half of that front third of your tongue. So this is a really quirky beer in a sense. And as I said, the impact on this is just unusual, but you get a little bit of that, acidity, red wine. It's almost like a red wine barrel aging sort of thing coming out of this one. So the fruity character is the most quirky point of this beer, but otherwise it's just really big and smooth. So yeah, this is definitely worth trying, but the price, as I say, that's the question point about this one. Yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, just to round off the review, it is a full body beer, there's no question in my mind about that. Carbonation is very, very smooth. It's really got a big silky kind of fibrous-y type mouthfeel to it, this one. It's not quite creamy, but yeah, quite fibrous-y. In terms of IBUs, I don't think this isn't too high in terms of IBUs for sure. Yeah, it's this is probably only about 40, maybe not even that, about 20 or 30. So it's almost got the same level of IBU as a kind of pastry stout. It does for me lean a little bit more towards that kind of pastry stout sort of thing. It's got quite a similar vibe, I feel like. It's almost like a barrel-aged pastry stout. And these styles are popular. I think that's a good way to describe this one. Yeah, barrel-aged pastry stout. That's what I think we can go for with this one stylistically. But yeah, malty side of the beer is really smooth and fibrous, as I say, almost like a pastry stout in a sense. There's a degree of sweetness to it, but yeah, more a kind of pastry, savoury type stout. The fruity notes, as we said, have a little bit of kind of acidity to them and tartness and things. That lingers there. But yeah, not a lot of IBU to this beer, 20 IBUs at most, I would say. So yeah, overall, I think this is a really, really interesting one. Now, the main thing for me with this, I wouldn't knock this beer, but I mean, when it comes to Imperial Stouts, I'm a bit more of a fan of old school, Russian Imperial Stouts and, coffee Imperial Stouts and stuff like this. When it comes to pastry stouts, they're fine. But if it's a pastry stout, I do like them to be a lot sweeter. I will say that. I do like them to be a bit sweeter than savoury, if that makes sense. So the savoury type of pastry stout isn't quite my thing, and this one really leans a little bit more towards that. I'm not sure how I feel about the kind of acidity in this one as well. It's a quirky beer and it's interesting to try, but when I paid 18 euros for this, 180 Swedish kroner, say about £16, $22 or something like that. I don't think that, for me, this beer isn't quite worth the price. I mean, you could get, other beers. You could get, 2 other very good Imperial Stouts for the same price as this one. So this one for me is a bit overpriced, I will say that. And I don't want that to be an insult to Frau Gruber or whatever, because obviously the importer is going to have to take a cut of the price of this and things. It is a barrel-aged beer, so it will be a little bit more. But yeah, when you consider the price of kind of regular beer in Germany, this is another thing that's in the back of your mind when you're reviewing German beer too. So I think this, personally, I would say this beer is not worth 18 euros. It is a half litre in fairness, so maybe, that's another thing you have to consider. They would be better, I think, to scale these beers down to be in 330 bottles. That's one thing I would say to them. And, if you could sell this for about, 12 euros in a 330, I think that, 10, 12 euros in a 330, I think that's about a fair price for this one. So 18 euros for me is a bit much. Yeah, you have to consider it's a 500ml, so that's pushing the price up a wee bit. It is an import beer, so that adds another euro or two onto it. So yeah, I'd be curious to know what they're selling this for in Germany, but I suspect since it's the private market down there, it wouldn't be too different actually. I couldn't find a German price for it. So yeah, a bit pricey, and as I say, just the more savoury side of the pastry stouts is just, it's not as much my thing as other things are. So to drink a half litre of this, I'm glad I'm going to share this beer, I will say that. So yeah, I think we can leave the review there. Really cool to have tried my first Imperial Stout from Frau Gruber, but I think I would be more interested in an old school Imperial Stout from these guys, like a Russian Imperial Stout, or even a coffee stout or a sweeter pastry stout. Those would tickle my fancy a bit more than a more savoury pastry stout, if that makes sense. But yeah, an interesting beer, and definitely glad to have reviewed this. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So this was the Heaven Hill from the Black Barrel series at Frau Gruber Brewing in Gundelfingen an der Donau in Schwaben in Western Bavaria in southern Germany. An interesting beer, and I'm glad I got the chance to review this for you. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Frau Gruber Brewing, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the near future. Again, thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.